Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. We're continuing to roll on in a post-Super Bowl week. What a crazy game last night, the GOAT, Tom Brady. We also had a wonderful week last week. Tamika Rich from the Atlanta Falcons, Michelle McKenna, the CIO of the NFL, and a very, very special guest today joining us, a very, very dear friend. I've been wanting to get him on for a while. Will provide amazing insight into the world of sports media, the emerging world of sports media, the things you see on television right now on ESPN. He has played an integral part of the things that you're seeing or on your app or the ESPN Plus app or all of those things. But Rob Temple is now the Chief Executive Officer with my dear friend Rick Jones and Ron Cook of FishBait Solutions. Prior to that, a nearly 20-year stellar career at ESPN, and we're going to unpack a lot of that today, but also been an amazing leader in the sports marketing industry for many, many years. Atlanta native, graduated from UNC Chapel Hill with political science. But Rob, welcome to Virtual Melt University. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Vince. Great to be here. Great to be connected with the students too. I love what you do with Melt U. It's awesome.
Well, we've been getting a tremendous amount of feedback. We've had a lot of people on the podcast. We've had a lot of your former colleagues from ESPN, and we've had the captain of FishBait, Rick Jones, on. I'm going to tell you a funny Ron Cook story one day that goes all the way back to Bart Starr and Kenny Stabler, and that's all I'm going to leave it at that right now.
Yeah, wait.
But yeah, I met Ron way back in the 80s. But glad to see you guys have united together. But before we unpack, what's going on now in the world and all that, we like to throw it back to our guest and really talk about, where your passion was ignited for business or for sports and the experiences that you had at UNC that sort of formed the basis of this passion and your subsequent professional success. But so where did it start?
It's funny, Vince. I had an exchange last week, a couple weeks ago, with Commissioner John Swofford, celebrating his retirement and stellar career at the ACC. And part of the exchange with John and I went back and forth on was both of us remembering our first interaction, which was when I was an undergraduate at UNC, and he was the athletic director at UNC before he became ACC commissioner.
Wow.
And he and I reminisced on the problem, and you'll hear me talk a lot about trying to understand the problem before you get to the solution. But Carolina had a problem. They had just built the Dean Dome, a privately funded, beautiful, Carolina blue basketball arena with 21,000 seats in it. And it was funded by private donors. And what happened when they opened it, it was phenomenal, but all the private donors were sitting down around the court. And so I was working with the Carolina Athletic Association, the student group that managed tickets and homecoming. There's about 12 of us. And Swofford and Bedour brought me and others in and said, can you all help us create a program to get students more engaged around, believe it or not, Carolina basketball, moving from Carmichael to the Dean Dome. So I actually put a business plan together. And remember, I was a poli-sci major. I was not a business major or a marketing major, but I put a business plan together that asked them to fund a flight for me to go to Bloomington, Indiana, and meet with their student group that did a phenomenal job at their basketball games and other things. And from that, I came back, I did the trip and came back and I wrote a business plan to create a program called Carolina Fever. And that group took over seats close to the court and in football and in non-revenue sports. And it had a point system, and we raised our own money, and they funded it, but we largely created our own funding. And that program that we created and launched in 1987 and 1988 still exists today.
Wow.
Has thousands of undergrads. And it was really my first it was really my first venture into marketing and unlocking the passion of fans for the joyful fandom that is closest to their heart. In this case, it was Carolina students, giving them a platform to engage with all sports, men's and women's sports across the board. And it's really fun to go back to Carolina. I follow them on social media. A lot of undergrads have reached out to me. I've spoken to the Carolina Fever directors. They've asked me to reprint a shirt that I hand drew in the '90s for the Carolina Duke weekend. It was called, excuse the language, called "Taking a Dookie" with the Ram reading the Daily Tar Heel on the.
I love that.
All very appropriate, but it was so much fun, and that really triggered my love of marketing and fan engagement and trying to learn what the problem is and create a solve for that. And then, of course, it created a lifelong relationship with Commissioner Swafford and I, who over the years we've always, bumped into each other when he was running the BCS or when we were launching the CFP or launching the ACC network. He and I would always kind of share a lot of memories and fun times over those days.
Well, that's an amazing story. And we talk, there's a lot of things that we talk to our students about, but you've hit on several of them, and a couple of them I want to unpack is that, and obviously we're all going through this crazy COVID cycle right now, but you had that experience. I had that experience at Auburn in sports information, but the campus truly is the ultimate professional lab. And what we encourage our students, not only to figure out some things while you're at school, because it's kind of your first time, but also, you're going to have access to think about what you just described, and think about you being a 20-year or 21-year-old person and the ability to be able to do something like that with one of the most vaunted brands in the world, Carolina basketball. So I want you to talk about the campus being the ultimate professional lab. And then you hit on something that I talk about a lot. To your point, I was driving Feinbaum to the airport 40 years ago, and Coach Vitale to the airport 40 years ago. Now they're my friends. We do business deals together. But you have to. We say that the first two letters of relationship are RE and reciprocal RE. You have to continue to cultivate and nurture these relationships. People say, "How do you represent Coke for 21 years?" I say, "I never take the relationship for granted." So, talk about your philosophies on relationship building and maintenance. Because Swafford, you guys have been at the table with major deals, and your experiences on campus and how they translated to this stellar career.
Well, to your point about driving Feinbaum, one of my favorite executives in the world that I had the pleasure to work with is George Bodenheimer, and he started off at ESPN driving Dick Vitale to the airport and driving tapes to the airport and working in the mailroom, and then ended up being the president of ESPN and one of the most extraordinary leaders I've ever worked with. But it does come down to relationships. I tell people all the time that I don't do anything without first thinking about whether my mom would approve or not. And a lot of times when I say I go with my gut or I sleep well at night or whatever, however I refer to that goes back to my mom. And if it's something that would make my parents proud, my mom proud, and do right by her, then I usually feel pretty good about it. And so I tell young people all the time, you have to manage your brand, and you have to understand that you have a voice more than ever. The platforms are there, and the need of people like you and I and big companies and agencies is to understand how young people are consuming content and connecting with each other and what drives their engagement and their purchase intent and brand preferences. And they have a voice, but they also have to manage their brand with social media. They have to think long term. I've managed my brand very carefully. There's relationships I've had at Carolina, like Dick Bedore and John Swafford. There's relationships I've had through the Olympic movement. There's relationships I've had with the SEC, having worked with them to move that SEC championship game in the early '90s to Atlanta from where it had been in the first year. And those relationships with Ben May and so many, Mark Womack and so many others at the conference, come back in your career. When we launched the SEC network, all of those relationships were around the same conference table and the same table, and we were able to really quickly put everything together and be involved in the most successful launch of a cable network in history. But young people have a voice, and it starts when they're in college, and I'm extraordinarily impressed. All the young people I meet, certainly the ones I've been exposed to at Chapel Hill because I'm on the board of visitors. I've spoken to a lot of young people. I try to help them connect with others, but they're doing things. I mean, they're creating podcasts, they're creating content, they're following NIL, they're active and pursuing career opportunities and paths that are based on their passions, but they're frankly doing it with a better knowledge base and a better connectivity than what I had. I was sort of, frankly, I was doing it because, we had just a tremendous opportunity to have fun and to control, 1,000 tickets, in the Dean Dome and at the football stadium. And it was a great platform, but it was funny how that also turned into a passion for marketing and unlocking brand value for partners and others. So that's my key is manage your brand and know that you have a voice and find ways to apply that.
Well, you hit on a lot of things, and I say this, and I say this a lot. Coming out of COVID, I and obviously it's just been brutal on everybody, and you pray you haven't lost anybody you loved and businesses and everything. But particularly for this generation of what I call the consumer, these kids, your daughter, my son, they're going to be, because they're so sophisticated, I think this is going to be the glory period for new opportunities in the world of business and sports marketing, unlike anything that we've ever seen. I mean, Rob, I use the terms yellow pages, encyclopedias, that you and I had to go do our research. And these kids have this at the, in the palm of their hand. But do you feel like this is going to be a renaissance?
Yeah, honestly, Vince, I really do. I think the next decade is going to be extraordinary. It's got a lot of markers in it that should make young people really excited. And I know how bad it is now. But if you think about the next decade, you've got a World Cup, a FIFA World Cup coming to North America, largely in the U.S. Mm-hmm. You've got a Summer Olympic Games coming to LA in 28, which, and all those will drive great, business metrics and confidence and other things. You've got the country's 250th anniversary in 2050, in 2026, the 250th anniversary, which I hope will help tell stories, diverse and inclusive stories that help bring the country together. And then you have a willingness of rights holders and companies to think differently, because the pandemic has really impacted everything they do. It's completely turned convention upside down. And for whatever their business is, it's either been good for it or compromised it, but it has forced them to think differently. And thinking differently is a benefit to young people, because you don't have to have all the answers. You have to be passionate. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be willing to learn and make mistakes. And you have to be confident enough to make those mistakes and work with people who are going to empower you to take chances. And I think all of that is in front of them. A willingness to innovate, a willingness to do things differently, a need to get back on track. And so invest and innovate and push forward. And also, I think, booster rockets for what'll be ahead over the next decade.
So you arrived. So I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but and you arrived at ESPN in 2002. How exactly did you get that opportunity and making a jump, because you had kind of been in quote on the the agency world and the rights world with Learfield and IMG, but I don't know where this opportunity came from. So how did it happen that you got into the worldwide leader?
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up of really modest means, and I did not know anybody, and nobody that I was related to knew anybody, and so I just put my head down and worked hard, and I had an opportunity to work for a sports marketing company in Atlanta that led to my work in Australia with the 7 Network. And that led to me being recruited by Jim Host to repackage the NCAA corporate champion and partner package. So I was the individual original architect of the NCAA corporate champion and partner media marketing rights architecture. And what happened when I did that?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I wrote that for Jim
Host. What year was that?
That was in 2001. And so I was involved with Jim in that original Coke deal, the 11.
Now, for our listeners who don't know, Jim Host is on the Mount Rushmore of sports business marketing, the godfather of the third tier multimedia rights fees. And I want you guys to study Jim Host because he's still amazing and probably could outwork me, you, and Rick.
And for the students out there, Vince, I would tell them to study Jim Host. He's published a book recently called Changing the Game.
I loved it.
And I knew I was getting old when he sent it a hand-signed copy to me and referenced the pages that he mentioned me in the
Right.
book.
Right.
But I worked for Jim, and what happened when I did that is the first 6 deals we did generated multiple millions of dollars, really over $30 million of multi-year revenue into the 22 NCAA championships that ESPN produced and distributed, the College World Series, the Frozen Four, all of that. And they had been using that inventory for scatter and packaging. They had never leveraged it for sponsorship or high yield money. Well, when that money came in, Ed Earhart, who's the president at ESPN Customer Marketing Sales, kept seeing me and sitting in these meetings. And he was like, how is this guy from Host leveraging all of this high yield multi-year revenue into these NCAA championships that we're basically, packaging as scatter and filler, upfront filler and stuff. And so he had me come over and talk to him. And he pretty quickly, I give him credit, and Tom Hagel and Sean Hanrahan and the others, they quickly sat down with me and said, yeah, let's get this guy over here. And they did it, to their credit, they did it the month that my wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. They got Disney to waive any pre-existing condition.
Wow.
Me over there. And the first project they gave me when I got there was Discover Card had dropped one of our, shows called College Game Day, presented by Discover Card. And that was the first project that I worked with Sean Hanrahan and others on to reimagine that as College Game Day built by the Home Depot. That was one of the first presentations I did 3 months into the job. Was in Atlanta to John Costello and Hugh Miskell and the whole gang, and presented that deal and then nurtured it for the last 20 years.
Oh, that is unbelievable. I didn't really realize that. So yeah, we need to get Jim Host on because he's probably already put 7 hours of work in.
Can't sleep fast enough.
And the book was, I love the book as well. So it's inspiration. So this celebrated, decorated career at ESPN, 2 decades, and it happened to be massive, gigantic decades of change. The transformation of college football, ESPN taking over Monday Night Football, you guys creating all of this programming. But talk us through your promotional progression, and then and where I'm going with this is that what our students don't realize is they go, okay, I want to go to work for ESPN. But what sometimes they don't realize is there's so many properties within ESPN that either they could work on them through ESPN or work on the properties themselves. So talk about your progression and your climb, and you mentioned Korea, and you mentioned Little League, and you mentioned all of these, the masters and all that. So within that, I push and encourage our students to find those opportunities.
Yeah. So when I got to ESPN, and again, I grew up modest means, never in my wildest dreams would have imagined working for the worldwide leader in sports, but I'd taken chances and worked overseas and done different things. And I ended up there. And at first I thought, what in the world do I know? And how am I going to contribute to this wildly successful company? But again, I started off with what problems am I trying to solve with the content side and with the way my job was structured to package and create, marketing-based revenue opportunities. When I got to ESPN, they were primarily selling cable television media. They were not exploiting a lot of marketing rights. And Sean Hanrahan had come from Tracy Locke and PepsiCo background, and he unlocked the idea of doing co-branded ads and promotional partnerships that were tied to consumer promotions using the media platform to unlock that. My background, having worked for Tim Smith at International Sports and Entertainment Strategies and others, my background was more in how to unlock the marketing value of intellectual property rights. And so I began to stitch together, for example, when I got there, the regular season of college football was not connected to the 4 BCS games on ABC, believe it or not. Unbelievable. So I went and I created 7 assets that were season-long assets themed around the BCS, the road to BCS that we sold to Russell Athletic, the BCS Spotlight Game of the Week secured by ADT. I created 7 full season, brand integrations that were leveraging the BCS through the regular season that dovetailed into the 4 ABC BCS games. They had never done that before. We sold all 7 of them because the first comment was, you can't talk about the BCS until we know the teams in mid-December, in early December.
Right.
And my point was, everybody's undefeated Labor Day weekend. They're all playing for the Crystal Football at the time. So we're going to talk about it week 1. And by changing College Game Day from a presented by Discover card to a deeper sponsorship integrated relationship built by the Home Depot and all the other things, those were the simple principles that we were applying: marketing-based solutions that were IP-driven, and wove them across the media landscape. And then, I did that with ESPN 25, our 25th anniversary, and created a huge juggernaut program in the summer of 2004 to leverage that anniversary, and took that from a loss maker that was going to cannibalize our inventory and lose multiple millions into a huge profit engine and marketing engine for the company. We did $1.2 billion Gatorade, 1.2 billion Gatorade bottles, and 50 million Happy Meals.
I was really jealous of that at the time, because I represented Powerade.
It was a counter program to the Summer Olympics that year in Athens, and it was efficient, and it drove summer, media continuity, and it drove IP, promotion at retail, and a lot of engagement. And it worked. And that was basically the secret formula, was leveraging, creating great ideas, unique swim lanes for clients, and leveraging the IP and marketing rights in new and creative ways. And that's how I worked with Rick Jones and others who were upstream influencers of ideas using separate assets, all the acronyms in college. And we put together, with the Heisman Trust, the right assets to create the Nissan Heisman House and other things like that, the Siemens Trophy with the ABC Crystal Basketball, and of course the AFCA Trophy, and then the CFP assets. And so a lot of the work that I've done has been in the college space, but then I did that same thing and worked across X Games and the NBA and NFL and the rest of the portfolio.
So you got a lot of things that you've unpacked, but the headline is innovation. So, and you counsel a lot of students, and if students are reaching out to you, or if they did, where would you guide them into future opportunities and things they need to do to prepare for that? So, for instance, we had an interview with Alan Green, the athletic director at Auburn, very progressive, former student athlete. We unpacked mental health. We unpacked fanalytics. We unpacked fan engagement, data analytics, and those health and nutrition. And you don't even have to be a sports marketing or a journalism communication student to get into some of those areas. Where do you see the future opportunities going in a post-COVID world for these current students?
Well, before I tell that, the first thing I would say to any student is believe in yourself and have the confidence to take chances and make mistakes. So many people limit themselves by not thinking that they can do something because they're not completely sure. And I didn't have a lot to lose. Again, I grew up with very little, and I was kind of wired to take chances and lead. I played sports, athletics. I was academically inclined as well. So I was just sort of wired to take chances when other people weren't. And I always found that a great advantage. So believe in yourself, and then figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy, and move in those directions. Try to bring together what you're good at with what you enjoy. So to answer your question, if you're good at math and analytics and data, I would absolutely say, that is an explosive world of understanding data and analytics, because every rights holder out there and every company out there is trying to figure out the democratization of their fans, their consumers, and how to monetize the democratization of those fans in an individual and collective fan and consumer way. And so understanding data and analytics offers not only huge opportunities in sports, but it offers huge opportunities in any industry that you're in. And so that would be, one up there. But it's the same thing if you have a marketing lens or a creative lens, figure out what you're good at and what you're passionate about and move in that direction as well. There's a democratization of content creation and storytelling. And so I'm seeing young, college students creating podcasts, creating programs of content where their student is working with the student athlete and they're figuring out how to help them have a voice and develop their brands. And so there's just a myriad of opportunities, but I would say the main thing is have confidence in yourself, but really truly figure out, what you believe in, and then leverage that, and then really understand what you're good at and what you enjoy, and try to bring those things together, and then network to find those connections. It's worth that to you in your long-term career. I know a ton of people who are great at what they do, but they don't enjoy it, or they love what they do, but they're not very good at it.
Right. I'm not sure which category I fit in there, but you hit the nail on the head. It's about being passionate. And I say in the book, failure is only the failure to try. And the great Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And I tell these kids that I'm like, hey, it's okay to get your knees skinned. It's all right. We trust me. I mean, Rob Temple, Vince Thompson, we still get our knees skinned, and we get back up on that saddle. And you pointed out a couple things. If people reach out to you, and I see a macro recurring theme in your life and professional career is that you've always added value to any job that you brought, and you always were a problem solver. So if a student is reaching out to you, they need to show you that they're prepared to understand who Rob Temple is and how they would bring value to FishBait Solutions or ESPN or the Final Four or the X Games or any of that. Talk about that and help these students understand what I'm trying to communicate to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I get it. You're an undergrad, you're young, you're a little intimidated. You see a title and you see a career background that involves, doing multi-billion-dollar rights renewals or multi-billion-dollar deals and the ad revenue marketing side for a big brand like ESPN, et cetera. And having partnered with big brands like the Home Depot or Chick-fil-A or Dr. Pepper or so many others. And it can be intimidating. And so I spend a lot of my time trying to diffuse that and just have a conversation one-on-one. Whenever I took over a group, including now being CEO of FishBait Solutions, the first thing I always say to the people, whether it was the 75 people that I oversaw for ESPN Sports Marketing or the 35 people in the ESPN Programming and Acquisitions group, the first thing I would say to them is, I work for you. And they would look at me sort of sideways, and I would say, no, I actually work for you. My job is to make you better, to make you more confident, to figure out what's going to unlock your potential. The better you are, the better we're going to be as a group, and the better I'm going to be, as an executive in charge of all these different things and functions and priorities. And so, but you really have to mean that. And young people in particular, want to find people that want to invest in them, that want to listen to them, that want to empower them, that want to teach them. I had a young student come work for me right out of Syracuse, and he was so unbelievably disciplined and smart, and he did all the hard work and came prepared and had the right disposition about everything, wanted to learn. Like, we just hired him a couple years ago, but he was just so smart and in tune with everything and willing to learn. It's just a joy. People love working with young people. They get a ton of energy and ideas from them.
Oh yeah.
And so they really need to find that connection and not be intimidated. They have to believe that they have value and that they're worth the investment of time with anybody, whether that's talking to Vince Thompson or Jim Host or Rob Temple. And they'll be stunned if they go into it with that attitude, how much that'll be returned back to them, because we just want to help. We've all had great careers. We just want to help, people do great things, whether it's your kids or people that you get to know or people that reach out to you. You just want to see them do well and help them make whatever connection it is that's going to lead them to their next opportunity.
And you just hit the nail on the head, because see, Rob, what I tell our students is that they forget that you and I were once in their shoes not too long ago. So we still have that understanding and that empathy. And really now where we're the phases of we are in our careers, that we really do genuinely just want to help. So take that step. Don't be intimidated. You have all the tools, but if you're going to reach out to Rob Temple, you better be prepared to understand who he is, because I try to tell our students that every interaction with Rob Temple is in the form of an audition. It's a process, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the more prepared, the student I mentioned from Syracuse who we hired at ESPN, the more prepared and not overconfident, but just being prepared and knowledgeable and handling things the right way and listening and being responsive. It just, and you're looking for the right connection. I may not always be the right connection for somebody depending on their skill set and their interest and whatever. Some people I talk to have no idea what they want to do. And so they're just sort of reaching and grasping at straws, looking for something to connect with them. And that's okay. That's okay. I didn't even know this was a career. I remember when I worked for Tim Smith and Susan Watson and the folks at International Sports and Entertainment Strategy, a sports marketing firm in Atlanta. I didn't even know that was a career. I did that job because I needed to get back to Atlanta and help my mom take care of my bedridden dad who was sick. I took that job to go home and to help my family. And I remember doing it for a couple of years and realizing, oh, this is like people have a career in the sports media space. Right. I didn't even know that existed. And then I also realized I like this and I think I'm pretty good at it. And those two things, again, sort of guided me. Like I stumbled into it, but then I was like, hey, I like this. And I think my creativity and my strategic insights and my work ethic can turn this into a pretty interesting career path. And that's what then gave me the confidence to work for them really productively for 5 years. And then they sent me to the Southern Hemisphere, to Sydney, Australia, to open the office there. And then I got recruited to the 7 Network, and then from there to New York to work for Host and then for ESPN. But it was that experience, right, sacrificing what I was probably going to go back to graduate school or law school and pursue a completely different career trajectory. But I did the Carolina Fever thing. I love the Carolina Fever experience. This felt a little bit like that, and it got me home. And then it turned into a career.
Well, I mean, and the other thing is that you, throughout your career, you've never been afraid to take the risk. You've never been afraid to fail. You've never been afraid to take anything on that your bosses or partners ask you to take on. And that's the other thing that we tell the kids, because prior to COVID, I saw a disturbing trend that there was a lot of instant gratification, that kids wanted to be the CEO overnight. And it's just, I'm like, guys, Rob Temple, Vince Thompson are overnight successes. It was just a long night. I mean, we're still out there. We're still out there grinding. We're curious. We're learning. But this has been, so good. We could go on all day. We know you're busy. We won't keep you, but we do appreciate you sharing this amazing wisdom. Rob Temple, Chief Executive Officer, CEO of FishBait Solutions, now with my dear friends, Captain Rick Jones and Ron Cook, the pirate, as I call him. Stellar 2-decade career, multi-billion-dollar deals at ESPN, all-around great guy, family man. Look him up on LinkedIn. He's one of the best. So, Rob, we do appreciate your time and sharing your words of wisdom with the students of Virtual Melt University, and we look forward to having you back on one day.
My pleasure, Vince. My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thanks, Vince. We hope you've enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with a new edition of Melt University 2021.